Howdy. My name is Gray Pilgrim. For many years, I used to watch, let me see if I can get this better. There. I used to watch and really enjoy the YouTube channel Forgotten Weapons. Forgotten Weapons is by a fellow named Ian McCollum, and if you're watching me, you've probably already heard of him. Ian has done videos about guns from all over the world, obscure ones that no one else had talked about for forever, and things that just used systems that were a little different or smacked of wrongness, or were from the early days of the revolver or the semi-automatic or whatever. And I've always been fascinated by that stuff. The mechanical stuff, the what I call the gadget factor, the fact that it could do things in a particular way. He's taken it from the earliest known semi-automatic, which was the Salvatore d'Armas, by the way, a Spanish-made gun, and it was the father of the Astra, to up through the 1911 and the Wonder Nines of the 80s and the modern Beretta, everything in between. From the earliest flintlocks, wheel locks, and fire locks, all the way to today. And he's done some really fun April Fool's shows too that are just superb. One, he almost had me fooled with a Viking invented fire lock, which was hilarious. And then he had a expert on Norse mythology speaking with him on the subject in Iceland, and I thought, this is going a wee bit far for a joke. But actually, he was there for other reasons, to look at the local collection. But as long as he was there, why not? And he also demonstrated it. Anyway, on that note, Ian sort of influenced my collecting interests a lot. A lot of these books you see behind me deal with obscure guns that most people have forgotten about. Most people don't know much about. And you have to really dig to find information about. So I get books and magazines and articles that, are very obscure and hard to come by. But as I said, it also influenced my collecting. And many years ago, one of these guns I already had because it was dirt cheap at the gun shop I stopped at. And I thought, well, that's really cool looking, and I'll take one. Anyway, let me show you something. This collection right here, I think that's about right for the angle. Is that about right for the? It should be. This collection is a bunch of guns that use obsolete systems that no one uses anymore, and they shouldn't. These two are locked breech, and the rest of these are blowback. Though this one is called a semi-blowback or a delayed blowback system. Let me describe them each. This is a 1907 32 ACP Savage, developed by Arthur Savage, developed by a fellow named Searle. He had the patent on it. Made by Arthur Savage, and is the basis of the 1911 Army Trials gun runner-up. I have held two 45 Savages, and they are gorgeous things, and I would love to have one, but alas, no. That's advanced collecting, and I'm not one of those. This uses a system that's quite interesting. Let me get the magazine out. You can't really tell unless you're really close, but take a look at the barrel. As I pull back, you'll see that the barrel turns just ever so slightly this way. Well, what's interesting about that is the barrel is turning this way, the rifling turns this way. And Searle claimed that, claimed that this particular action, the bullet's momentum spinning, offset the barrel so that for the first fraction of a second of it actually firing, that this gun would actually stay locked. Well, he was wrong, but it's a good idea, and the thing basically is a blowback, and it's a good blowback. This one is also blowback. This is also American. This is a Warner Infallible. in spite of the name, it's one of the most dangerous handguns ever made. The first model of these, instead of having this pin that held things together, it had a little lever here. And if that lever got loose or got bumped, then the problem is that at this time, Browning had the patent on the slide. So this does not have a slide. It has a bolt. But as you can see, when the bolt comes back, it can get a little bit of momentum from a 32. Well, let me pull the magazine first. Empty, empty. And in takedown, this thing is just kind of the weirdest thing on earth, basically. You push this pin in. Let's see if I can do it. Push the pin in, pull it through, and then pull back. And you notice how these two little pins right here, this pin locks to those pins there. Those pins have the recoil springs on them, or some recoil on them, and they provide much more recoil than the little spring that's on the barrel itself. So that means that, or the bolt itself, excuse me. And because of that, it's much harder to pull it back. That little action is great for a gun, but lousy for the shooter, because if this thing happens to be pushed through, or in the case of that lever was pushed down, and you shoot it, the only thing holding it is a little pin back here. This is the guide stop to keep it from going all the way off. Well, if that thing breaks off during shooting because of an extremely powerful 32 or something, this bolt thing will just hit you right in the face. So the Warner Infallible is only infallible for the fellow you're shooting at, because it'll probably blow up and kill the guy shooting it. This one is a German Dreisse. And the Dreisse was not made by Dreisse, by the way. That was just a brand name. This was again, Browning's slide action patent was standing in the way, so they made this. And this uses, you notice that instead of being pulled back from the back, you pull back from the front. And this is an extremely stout recoil spring. This bolt is a wraparound bolt, very similar to what the Uzi developed. But the concept is that the weight of the bolt is what stands in the way of the bullets ejecting and stuff. So it's a very stout blowback design. Also in 32 ACP. Okay, now to the two lock breech. These are both Steyrs. This, excuse me, this one was developed at the behest of Karl Roth. He was the financier to run it. He said, let me get up a little bit. Okay. But it was developed by a Austro-Hungarian, later Czech designer by the name of Karl Krinka. He was born in what is now the Czech Republic, and is of Czech ethnicity, and it's a brilliant, brilliant engineer. Now this one does use the, it's empty by the way, rotating barrel system. But this time for locking, you can see it there. It rotates much more than the Savage. This was the Austro-Hungarian Army, or excuse me, Cavalry's issued pistol. And it has an extremely heavy trigger on it. By the way, this trigger, it's a safety trigger like the Glocks use. Matter of fact, this is what the Glock copies. And this is the actual firing pin, but it sticks out so you know it's cocked. Karl Krinka, as I said, was a brilliant designer. Well, this was adopted in 1907. Well, then in 1912, they adopted this. This is the Steyr Hahn. Hahn means hammer. So it's the Steyr with a hammer. But it also works on a rotation system for locking. This, though, looks something like a Colt. Not a Colt 1911, more like a Colt 1908, 1906, where it uses this cross pin to hold the slide on. Let's see if I can do this. Yeah, it's empty. The slide, by the way, this is the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and I don't know if Browning's patent was still in force. If it was, they didn't care, and they developed this. This one, I note, does not have a slide on it, so Carl Krenke must have cared about Browning. I think the two would have gotten along well. Anyway, this thing was developed basically by committee, and Carl Krenke had some design elements that he developed, in that this rotating barrel idea was used again in this pistol. But let's see, push this down and pull forward, yeah. But as you can see, it's a hammer. This shoots an 8mm, a proprietary 8mm round, never used on any other pistol. This uses a round called the 9mm Steyr, which was 9x24, which is the same size as 9mm Largo, but the taper on the brass is slightly different, and this will not shoot a Largo. An Astra 400, which was also designed in 9mm Largo, will shoot 9mm Steyr, 9mm Parabellum, or 9mm Largo, or 9mm Glisenti for that matter. But this one it cares very much on what its diet is. And I had two of these. I gave one to my cousin, but he enjoys it. But I gave him a few rounds of ammo too. I reloaded, but I reload for this too. That took some doing. Before I could find the brass, I used to have to make my own brass, and I made it out of 32 H&R Magnum. What you do is you turn off the rim on the Magnum revolver cartridge, then you on a lathe, and then you cut a extractor groove, and then take it off, and that's what you use. A company in Australia was also making that kind of brass retail, and it works, but I don't load it very heavy because, well, it's a weak case, let's put it that way. But then Starline made some of this, and I bought up a whole ton of it. Anyway, oh gosh, my sinuses are getting to me. There you go, excuse me. This is my collection of extremely weird actions. I mean, you've seen each of these probably in earlier videos of mine, but I haven't thrown them all on the table at once. All of these are slightly different than a modern design. Yes, we have blowbacks now. Beretta makes one in 32 even. I think there's been several others that are still made. Well, not as many as before. At one point, 32 ACP was the round of choice. But nowadays, people just think that it's just too weak. I don't know. I usually carry a 22 Magnum revolver on me because regardless of what it is, if it pokes a hole and you know how to use it, it is a deterrent. And and anybody who has half a brain doesn't want a hole poked in them. That's just the way it works. So I don't turn my nose up at anything. You know, in a rock fight, any gun was the king. You know, so, or even in a knife fight. You know, what was it? Sean Connery said in The Untouchables. You know, the stupid fool brought a knife to a gunfight. Well, you know, I always carry a gun. Maybe not be a big gun, but it's a gun. Sometimes I carry a 32. Sometimes I carry a 38. Sometimes I carry a 9mm. You just never know what kind of day it is. Anyway, my collection of weird guns. And let me know what you think. Happy trails.